Oh good, you're here. So Dr. Fink again. I managed to convince my production crew that they have massive problems with their necks and they'll be under care for a long time. What that means is that we get to keep their camera and I get to manipulate them, pun intended, for a longer time, which means we can make more videos. You may or may not know that chiropractors focus on getting people healthy or helping people to get healthy without drugs or surgery. One of the ways we do that is by educating our patients as to what they should be and shouldn't be eating, what's good for them. One of the ways we do that is by taking them on a little tour through the supermarket, which we're going to do now. What we're going to do is show you some tips on getting in and out of the supermarket while maintaining some semblance of a healthy meal for your family. All right, let's get started. So what does this section have to do with this section? Or the one behind me? Or this one over here? Or this section? Hey, Meredith. So all these sections are refrigerated. That's because the things in these sections can go bad. If it can go bad, that means it's good for you. It's a living thing. And this living thing has to be kept cold or frozen. If you think about a piece of chalk, chalk has a lot of calcium in it, right? If you eat that chalk, which everybody's kids have tried to do, didn't help their bone growth. The calcium inside chalk is inorganic and the body has trouble taking that up. There's calcium though in broccoli and in some of these other refrigerated things. That calcium is bound up in the broccoli in what we call a living matrix. And the living matrix makes it easy for your body to take it up. So in the cold sections are living things. Living things, good for you, right? So the first and the best thing we're going to talk about tonight is to work the edges. Stay on the outside because that's where all the freezers are, right? The exception to this is the ice cream section. That's a whole nother beast, so ignore that, all right? Let's move on to the next thing. All right, let's talk about some fun words. First words I want to talk about are whole grain versus multigrain. Now, in this piece of bread, we have whole grain. If you think about a corn kernel, it's got 8 parts. 1 part tastes good, but isn't that good for you? 7 parts are good for you, but they don't taste good. So you can do one of two things. You could take the thing that tastes good from 7 different corn kernels, call that multigrain, or you can take a whole bunch of corn kernels, use the whole thing. Use the whole thing, it's called whole grain. That's good for you. Multigrain is not necessarily good for you. So you need to be looking at that. Bread products are a great example. You want non-enriched whole grain. When I say words like enriched or bleached, that means we killed it. We did something to it, then we had to put something back in. Real foods don't need that, all right? So watch out for that. The last thing I want to talk about is slotting fees. There's a lot of levels here. Is this bread necessarily better than the other one? If it follows our criteria, it is. But the deal is that companies will pay a whole bunch of money to have their bread right in your face. A good example would be a fireworks stand. Maybe if they could display the fireworks that won't blow up in your hand and cause caustic burns, that would be a better way to do it. But they don't. If you look down at the bottom, it's just breads that have not paid the slotting fee to have their bread in the middle. It's not necessarily bad, all right? Let's move on and talk about some frozen stuff. All right, so check it out. So frozen. I hear about this all the time. What is frozen? Is it good? Is it bad? Frozen's great. In some cases, it's as good as or better than fresh. The reason why, let's say the guy picking the lettuce head, maybe he's not having a good day, maybe he's a little sick, maybe that gets on the lettuce, maybe it doesn't. When they freeze stuff, it kills everything around. Frozen is good. Another way you know frozen is good is because of this. When you look at the bag, you'll see the bag, the bag. When you look at the bag, you'll see on the back, it just says peas. Right there, peas. When you see one thing talking about what's in the bag, that's good for you. When you see 4 lines of 6-point font, not necessarily good for you. So when you're making health decisions, make sure you get the simpler, the better. Fewer ingredients, better for you. The more doctoring we do, the more preserving we do, not necessarily a good thing. I almost got in a fist fight once with a patient who tried to tell me that a can of strawberries is just as good as frozen strawberries, and that's not true. A lot of times, strawberries get canned, they add a syrup to them, something to preserve them. Twinkies are a really good example. That is a chemical food. Twinkies will survive a Holocaust. That's not necessarily a good thing. All right, let's move on to another thing. I got a couple more tips and then we'll be done. Number 1, don't come here when you're hungry. You will buy a bunch of other stuff that you don't necessarily need because you're hungry, thinking, oh, I'll eat this. By the time you get home, you're full and you haven't emptied the cart or the car, and that's not a good thing. Number 2, get off the phone when you're in the store. If you're having an argument with someone about how good looking I am, you don't want to be arguing as you're walking down the aisle. You're just going to flip every box into there, and you're going to buy a bunch of stuff that you don't necessarily need. It's the same thing with scanning your pantry before you leave. You want to know what you need. Maybe make a list. Sure, it makes you into that guy with a list or that girl with a list. But those people get what they need and they get out. The more time you spend walking around and doing stuff, the chances that you'll buy something you may not necessarily need increase. With that in mind, if you have kids, kids are the ultimate deterrent towards buying healthy food. Sometimes they don't like it and they're gonna wanna buy all the toys and you just run out of energy fighting them. So family time is fun, but if you're being efficient in the grocery store, you shouldn't need to bring them as much. Now, sometimes you gotta bring them and that's just fine, but make sure you set some ground rules. Know your middle ground before you get started. Keep these tips in mind. You'll thank me later. I'll see you guys later.